like to share a little bit about fear today, because we're in this time where there's such an escalation of violence, which can bring up strong fear in people, and that we can see this escalating around the world. And fear is so much a part of the human experience. And with what is happening, this just points towards the necessity of facing our own fear. In doing so, we are ceasing to perpetuate fear in the external world. And it is really something that we can do. It doesn't mean it's easy. And yet, I know for myself, no matter what the situation might be when I die, I would really like to do my best to ensure that I don't die bound by fear. Thus, the work is my own. And I'm aware that, as I say, this is something that we can do. It's going to look really different for everybody. That some of us may have very deep-seated fear, and just to acknowledge it, to be in the room, to know it's in the corner, can be the most courageous thing we've ever done. And so it's a real journey from fear to fearlessness. And it has to be done with the utmost kindness and care for ourselves, with whatever wounds we may have incurred along the way. So let's just take a look at some of the different ways that we might experience fear, just to name a few. That there is a fear of the world events. That can be fear of failure, keeps us from trying. Fear of rejection keeps us from being generous. Fear of what our bodies might go through in our lifetime, that just keeps us in a state of worry. Or, we can just find this fear drives us to keep trying to find more security in a very insecure world. And fear is so debilitating. And then as we meditate, we also encounter different levels of this fear that can be often very intense or very subtle. And it can be on the subtle level of the uneasiness that we experience, where we're relentlessly trying to find security in constantly shifting terrain. Might be full-blown terror, as at times it's as if the feet are the floor under our feet just dissolves. Or there might be fear of different mind states, mind states that we've suffered from, like depression, self-hatred, sadness, despair. Or it could be fear of stillness itself, fear of doing nothing, simply being, as if we're letting go of any prospect that we'll find peace, and it can feel overwhelming. So I feel like it's really important on all levels to talk about fear, because otherwise we encounter it, we think that we're a failure because of it, and that we become trapped within it. So bringing it to the surface, bringing it to awareness. And I know for me, when I first saw that fear is actually workable, was not through meditation, but through rock climbing. I have a love of the outdoors, yeah. And I also discovered that I loved climbing, and yet I had a fear of heights. So it was kind of this melting pot of, both what I found kept me feeling really alive, and having to be present, because if I didn't, then it was really it was quite debilitating to be stuck in fear. And so one of the things that happened one time, I was climbing up a rock face and I froze. I couldn't move. So my friends below me tried to help me, that they were giving me instruction, but I couldn't move. And so finally a friend came up and, really helped my foot to find the next hold. And I could move out of that very slowly. But there was a lot that I learned about fear through climbing, how I had to watch my thoughts and give no juice to the ones that perpetuated fear. I couldn't stop those thoughts from arising, but I could be aware of them. And with awareness, they lost their grip. As well, I saw the necessity of going step by step, not to get overwhelmed by the immensity of what I was doing. Years later, in an intensive retreat, I was once again face to face with the fear, and the power of it took me by surprise, having thought I was done with fear. And at its worst, it felt like I was blindfolded and moving through a treacherous tunnel. And I was just feeling my way, listening deeply, remembering the positive influences and what I had heard about how to practice, going step by step, breath by breath, as I had learned so many years ago on the side of a mountain. And it didn't go away instantly on arising. It was something that I practiced with for a long time. And there was a point in the midst of this where I realized this was my teacher. And if I had to be with this for the rest of my life, this was where my learning was. It was very humbling, and yet it's what was happening. So on the journey from fear to fearlessness, it is not that we stop experiencing fear, but rather we find ways when it arises that we are not stopped by it. We still have access to our inner wisdom. Through seeing and accepting this is just what is happening. We come in touch with this power of awareness. So we work with fear with a willingness to be with it, and sometimes being close to it, looking it straight in the face, and other times needing to just know, oh, fear is here. What else can I be aware of? So this is really important, because at times we can only gently touch it with awareness, but this does really have an effect. Awareness helps the freeze to thaw, and so, but really respecting our own limits with this. And seeing the thoughts in the mind. I remember being on a long retreat again, and I was experiencing in the middle of the night pain in my chest, and I thought I might die. And then I realized this is just a thought. And the whole thing evaporated. It was phenomenal to experience. It was like seeing just that power we give to these thoughts that are not based in reality. They're not based in truth. So, there is places where we have a healthy fear, and that is where, fear is telling us to get out of harm's way. So an example might be you're crossing the street and a truck comes barreling down on you, and fear arises and moves you to get out of the way. This is something we do pay attention to, but so often the fear that we encounter is made up, a made up story, or made up from misperception of being just clouds of confusion. And that could be clouds of confusion that have come down to us through people and the perceptions they held, and we pick it up. That's where we need to take the stand with fear, to be able to work with it in the most tender, loving, kind way that says, fear, I see you, and to honor our own process with this. And in doing so, that we're bringing in these qualities of love and compassion rather than desire and aversion. We're going step by step, drop by drop, as we learn to face our fears. And as we feel more safety within ourselves, we start to come back to our innate well-being, then this has a ripple effect in the world. So this is the time, this is the place, and we do it as best we can. And sometimes with fear, we will need other modalities of support, and that is perfectly fine. Just do it with kindness, compassion, and knowing that this is really for the benefit of all beings everywhere.